There is our animation. This is an animation showing from 1896 all the way to the present which countries participated in the Olympics and who won the most medals. So you can see it was very much located in Europe and North America initially, but then the Olympics have become truly global in recent years, which is very cool. Hello and welcome to this Power BI beginner tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to cover the main components of Power BI: DAX, the M language, the Power Query Editor, and the report view. By the end, you will be able to import, analyze, clean, and visualize your data. And we're going to do it by analyzing a data set on athletes in the Olympics from 1896 through the present day. It's a pretty fun data set. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is the Power BI interface. If you don't have Power BI installed, it's a free download from Microsoft. The first thing we're going to do with Power BI is import our data file. And to do that, we're going to click Get Data at the top left, and we're going to select Text CSV. And we're going to select this file called athleteevents.csv. So let's go ahead and open that up. And as Power BI opens the file, it gives you a little preview so you can make sure that everything looks good. In this case, it does, so we'll go ahead and hit Load to load the data in and start working with it. All right, the file has been loaded. There are three main sections to Power BI. There's the report section, the data section, and the model section. We're going to work with all three sections in this video, but for now, we're going to go to the data section and just take a look at the data and see what it looks like. So each row in this data set is an individual competitor in a single Olympic game. So this first row is Gaston, who has the unique ID 676. He was a male who we do not know the age, height, or weight of, who competed for France, which has the NOC code, which is just a country code, France, in the 1900 Summer Games. And his sport was fencing, and here's a little longer description of that event. And he did not win a medal in those games. If he had, this would have said bronze, silver, or gold. So hopefully you have a good overview of what the data looks like now, and we can go ahead and start doing some exploratory visualization. So we'll switch back to our report section here. And the first thing we'll do is build a matrix visualization. So a matrix visualization works a lot like a pivot table. And if you've used a pivot table in Excel or any other tool. So the first thing we'll do is we'll decide what column we want to pivot on. And in this case, that's going to be the team column. And what we're going to do is find the number of competitors by team. So the total number of people who've competed for each Olympic team. And teams are roughly analogous to countries. They're not 100%, which we'll get into in a little bit, but more or less it's how many people competed for each country. So let's pull name over into our values. And what we'll look at is the count of the number of names. And then let's sort this descending. So we can see 17,000 people have competed for the United States across all of the Olympic Games that the United States has competed in. About 12,000 have competed for France, and so on. So let's rename this column to just better understand it. And what we'll call this is competitor count. The next thing we can do is we can create another column that has the number of games, the number of Olympic Games each country competed in. So we'll drag games over under values. And this time what we want is the distinct count. And what we'll rename this to is total games. So this tells us the total number of Olympic Games that each country competed in. So for example, the Soviet Union has competed in a lot fewer Olympic Games than other countries because they didn't have the opportunity to. The Soviet Union didn't exist for the entire period of time that the Olympics have been running. All right, the last thing we can do is we can add a filter to this matrix visualization. And what we'll do is we'll add a filter and say only show countries where total games is greater than, let's say, 15. All right, so that reduces the number of rows in this table. Okay, let's look at a couple more visualizations and then we'll come back and we'll fix an issue with this visualization. And if we scroll down, we can see what that issue is. It's that not every team name is fully unique. So here's United States 1, United States 2. We'll need to investigate and figure out what's going on there. And I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. But first, let's go ahead and make a couple more exploratory charts. So the next two charts we make are going to be line charts. So we can go over to the right here and click line chart, and that will pop a line chart template in here. And then what we need to do is pull the year value over onto the axis, and we will say the legend is the season. So it'll be whether it's the summer or winter Olympics. And then the values here for this first one are going to be the total number of competitors. So we'll drag a name over to the values field, and we'll say count, which it already is. So let's rename this total competitors. So now we have total competitors by year and season. You can see the title automatically updated, which is great. And we can see how many people competed in each Olympic Games. It looks like it's been growing relatively quickly over time for both the winter and the summer. All right, so let's look at one more exploratory visualization. And what we'll again do is drag year onto the axis. And this time we'll also drag season into the legend. And what we're going to do is look at the total number of countries that competed in each Olympic game. So we're going to drag NOC, which is the country code, over into values. And we'll look at the distinct count instead of just the total count. And let's rename this to competing countries. And this shows us how many countries competed in each Olympic Games. You can see there was a dip in 1980. I think that was the year that the Olympics were boycotted by some countries, and I think that's what accounts for that dip. All right, so we have a few exploratory data visualizations. As I mentioned, there's one issue we do want to fix here. So that's this. When it says United States 1, United States 2, we want that to say United States instead. And one way we can fix that is to drag the NOC code over and stick that over team. And what Power BI does is it automatically associates the teams with the country code. So you can click into USA and see all the individual teams that have competed for the US. But it also rolls up into this nice country code. You may have noticed one other cool thing. When I clicked on a country, it automatically filters these two charts as well to only show data from that country. So this chart now only shows the number of competitors from the US. So that's a really nice thing about Power BI, is this filtering ability that crosses between charts. So if I click on France, now this chart only shows the number of athletes that have competed from France in each Olympics, and so on. Really, really nice what you can do with these linked visualizations. All right, so there's one more thing we need to fix with this chart. Now we fixed it to aggregate these team names together. So United States 1, United States 2 are now together. But these country codes can be really hard to read. You may know what all of these country codes are, but some of them you may not know off the top of your head. So what we're going to do is turn these into longer country names. And to do that, there's actually one more data set we need to import. So we can go ahead and click on Get Data again. And again, we'll do text CSV. And this time we'll pull in this NOC regions data set. So let's go ahead and hit open, and Power BI will give us a preview. All right, so this data set, the first column is the country code. The second column is the country name. And the third column is just some notes about the country. We don't need the third column. We just need the first two. You may notice there's a small issue with the import here. These are the column headings, NOC, region, and notes, but Power BI has not automatically recognized them. So instead of hitting load this time, we're going to hit transform data. And that will open up the Power Query Editor, which lets us clean, transform, do a lot of things with the data. It is incredibly powerful, and we're going to be using it a lot in this tutorial. For now, what we need to click is this button here, Use First Row as Headers. So let's go ahead and click that, and you'll see this first row has now been switched to be the headers. You'll also notice these applied steps on the right. This is an incredibly powerful feature of Power Query Editor. If we click on the previous step, you can actually visualize how your data set has changed over time. So if we click on this change type step, back then we did not have the correct column headers, but then we promoted the headers and now we do. You can also go back and delete old steps or edit them if you made a mistake. So very powerful, and we'll work with this Power Query editor later. For now, we'll hit close and apply to import the data set and make the changes we made. So we can now go to this data section here, and on the very right, we can click on NOC regions, and we'll see our data has been imported properly. All right, now is when we use the model view in Power BI. So what this lets you visualize is relationships between data sets. And if you're familiar with SQL, you may understand what those relationships are, but different fields in different data sets can be connected. So, for example, Power BI has automatically created a relationship between the NOC column in athlete events, which was our first data set, and the NOC column in NOC regions, which is our second data set. And if we click on it, we can see that the columns are linked, and we have a many-to-one relationship. So many rows in the athlete events table can be connected to a single row in NOC regions. So I'll hit OK. This automatic relationship has already been created. And then I'll show you why this relationship is so powerful. So we've gone back to our visualization. We had these country codes, and we want to find a way to convert these into country names. So what we can do now is go over to our fields on the right and find region. Region is the country name, and we will drag this up here. And you can see it has automatically updated our table now with the full country name. And we'll get rid of NOC entirely, actually. We don't need it anymore. So what's happened? So if we go back to our model tab, I can use that relationship to explain it. So what Power BI did is essentially add the NOC, the region from the NOC regions dataset into athlete events using this relationship between the NOC fields. So basically it said, okay, let's go to athlete events, which I'll pull up here. So if the NOC here is FRA, then it looked for the matching NOC in NOC regions, and it would find FRA. And then it pulled the region that was associated with that NOC code over to athlete events. So that linkage enables us to basically treat columns in NOC regions and columns in athlete events equally and use them in the same visualizations, which is very, very powerful and lets you connect different types of data across tables. So that's an incredibly powerful feature of Power BI. Okay, so now we've done a little bit of exploratory data analysis. The next thing I want to do is start to count the number of medals per country. And if you remember the medals column, if we go back to athlete events, the medals column is empty if they didn't get a medal. And actually, let me sort this instead of scrolling. So let me just sort this descending. And if they did get a medal, it says the type of medal they got. What we need to do is convert this column to numbers, because what that lets us do is do things like count up how many medals each country got, count up how many gold medals each country got, etc. So to do this, we are going to go back to our Power Query editor to add some new columns to our data set. Now, you might be wondering why we're not doing this in DAX. It's because the data cleaning capabilities of Power Query Editor are far better than the ability to data clean in DAX. And in general, when you want to add columns to your data set that you're going to use in different contexts, like in future DAX expressions, in visualizations, in future other tables, it's better to use Power Query Editor. If you just want to create a column that you'll use in a visualization, it's better to use DAX. So that's why we're using Power Query Editor here. So we have our medal column, and what we can do is create a new column. So we'll go to Add Column at the top here, and we'll click Conditional Column. So this adds a new column that has a value based on a condition. And we'll call this bronze. So we'll say if medal equals bronze, then this equals 1. Otherwise, it's going to equal 0. So basically, this column will indicate if someone got a bronze medal or not with a 1 or a 0. So let's hit OK. And we've now created a new column called bronze. And you can see when medal equals bronze, this row is 1. All right, now let's do this again. But this time, I'm going to hit Custom Column. And I'm going to show you a different way to do the same thing. This is the M language, which is the language we use in Power Query Editor to edit data and create new columns, transform columns, etc. It's different from DEX, which is used in the data view, and I'll show you a little bit later. Slightly confusing, but they enable us to do slightly different things. So we're going to type out an M formula. So we're going to say if metal equals silver, then 1 else 0. So this does the exact same thing that you just saw us do in that conditional expression. I just wanted to show you two ways to do it. So that's silver. We'll create another custom column for gold. So we'll say if metal equals gold, then 1 else 0. And metal is just, this is a reference to the column called metal. And we're saying if it equals this string gold, then put a 1 in the row, otherwise put a 0 in the row. So let's go ahead and run this. All right, now what we can do is create a column that adds up all of our counts to get the total number of metals. And we can use this column to find the total number of medals each country received in each Olympic game. So what we're going to do is we're going to add bronze, we're going to add silver, and we're going to add gold. So let's create that total medals column. And then we can create one final column. Last column, I promise. We'll call this points. So we'll assign a point value to each type of metal. So bronze will get 1 point, silver will get 2 points, and let's give gold 3 points. So what this is saying is multiply the number of gold medals by 3, multiply the number of silver medals by 2, multiply the number of bronze medals by 1, and add that up and create a column called points. So let's go ahead and run that. And we now have a few different columns that we can use to find the total number of medals per country, the total number of points per country, etc. You can try a different weighting system for points if you want. If you say, okay, it's only gold medals that matter, you can multiply gold medals by more. Totally up to you. One last thing is let's just make sure these columns are the right data type. So let's change them to a whole number data type, which will just make some computations easier later on. You can see all of the steps we took in the applied steps. And what we can do now is just close and apply. And Power BI will just apply the steps to our data set, and it will now be available for analysis. Okay, so let's create a new page in our report. So first we'll call this page Exploratory Analysis. And then we'll create a new page hitting this plus icon. And there are a lot of very cool types of analysis we can do. The first thing we'll do is create a map. So let's make this bigger. And what this map is going to do is we will use the region name as the location, and we'll use points as the medal count. So we'll drag points over into tooltips. And now when you hover over a country, you'll see the total number of points that country has received across all the Olympic Games. All right. We can also color code the map based on points. So we'll click over here to the visual format options, and we'll go down to fill colors. And then we hit F of X, and what we can select is we can select the points column, and we'll say we want the sum of points, and that will determine how the map is shaded. So when a country has fewer points, the map will be lighter. When it has more points, it will be darker. So let's go ahead and run that. And we see Russia and the US end up with a lot of points, also Germany. So very cool. We just created a map and we highlighted it based on how many points countries have earned from Olympic medals. All right, so let's go ahead and rename this. Let's call this country points. All right, and then there's one more type of map we can create, and that is an ArcGIS map, which will enable us to actually create an animation, which is going to be really cool. And to do that, we have to first transform one of our columns because of the format that ArcGIS requires columns to be in. So we'll go back to our data tab on the left, And we will go and we will look at this year column here. So year is just whole number year. But Power BI has a specific date type. So it's a specific type of column that maps to a date. So you can see this date column here. So we can actually use a DAX expression to convert this column into a date. So let me go ahead and hit duplicate. So we can copy this column. Actually, I won't duplicate. I'll just hit a new column. And what we'll say is this column is a date. So the year is going to be year. And then we will assign 1 as the month, so January, and 1 as the day. So January 1st of whatever year the games were actually held will be this column. And we'll call this column time. So let's go ahead and run that. So we can see it pulled over the year and it converted it into a date time column. And we did that using the date function in DAX. So if you type out, so if we just type date, Power BI gives you a little hint as to what you need to put into that formula. So in this case, we put in the year, then we put in the month, then we put in the day. All right, and that gave us a date time column. So we can go back to our report now, and we'll create a new page. And this time, we're going to use an ArcGIS map. It's going to tell us to log in. We don't need to log in. What we'll do instead is we'll again use the region as the location. And region is a country name, but Power BI automatically parses that into coordinates and can display it on the map. So we're going to use region there. We are going to use points as the size of the dot on the map. So the more points a country has, the bigger the dot is going to be. We'll also go ahead and use points as a tooltip, so you can hover over the map and see how many points the country had. We'll also use points as the color. So the more points a country has, the more orange, or yellow, I guess in this case, the shape will be. And then a very, very cool thing we're going to do is we're going to drag time over into this time field here. Okay, and what this gives us is this time selector at the bottom. So we can go ahead and hit play now, and we can visualize over time which countries participated in the Olympics and how many medals they received. The bigger the dot, the more medals. The more dots, the more countries are participating. So pretty cool. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So there is our animation. So this is an animation showing from 1896 all the way to the present which countries participated in the Olympics and who won the most medals. So you can see it was very much located in Europe and North America initially, but then the Olympics have become truly global in recent years, which is very cool. All right, so that's an ArcGIS map and an animation. Okay, let's rename this points over time. Okay, all right, there are a couple other things I want to show you all, some more features of Power BI. The next thing I want to show you is I want to figure out how to find the number of medals a country has, or the number of points a country has per 1,000 people in the country. So we need a way to join population data and medal data together. So the first thing we're going to do is import our third and final data set, which will also be a CSV file. This is called countrypopulation.csv. So let's go ahead and open this up. And we have a similar problem to before, where our column headers are actually the first row and Power BI isn't recognizing them correctly, but we can fix that. This data set shows countries, so country name and country code, and then it shows their population over time. In this case, we only care about their population in 2020. So let's go ahead and hit transform data, and we will make this data set a little bit cleaner. So the first thing we want to do is again hit use first row as headers, which will pull our headers in properly. Then what we want to do is choose only certain columns. We don't want all of the columns. So we definitely want country name and country code, and then we want this 2020 column, which is the country's population in 2020. So let's hit OK. All right, and then this data set looks good. So we can go ahead and hit close and apply, and we can go back to our data explorer here, and we can click on country population. All right, so we're just going to rename this column to population, just to make it a little bit cleaner. All right, so we just loaded in population data. The next thing we have to do is add in a column to join this column to our base data by. So this country code is unfortunately very, very different from the NOC code. I don't have an easy way to show that to you at the moment, but we can't join based on this code. We have to join based on the country name. The problem with this is if we go to our athlete events data, you'll remember some of the team names had dashes in them. So it was United States 1, United States 2, etc. So we actually need to create a new column that gets rid of that -1, -2, -3, etc. So the team name is consistent. So we'll go back to Power Query Editor, hit Transform Data again. I actually want to duplicate this column first before I split it. So then let's go ahead and split this column by delimiter, and we'll do the same thing we did before. We'll split it based on the dash. Okay, and what we'll see now is we have just the base team name. All right, so let's go ahead and just delete this, and let's rename this to team base. So this is the base team name without the -1, -2, etc. And things look good. So we should be able to go ahead and just close and apply at this point. Now, the next thing we'll do is we now have our athlete events file with our team base name. The next thing we need to do is actually group this. So what we'll do is we will go back to our Power Query Editor, and we can use this group by functionality. First, what we'll do is we'll duplicate this table, and what we'll rename this to is medals by country. And we'll hit group by. And what this will let us do is pick the columns we want to group by. And Power BI will then find the unique values in those columns and create basically summaries where each value in that column is only one row in the new table. So we're going to group in an advanced way. We're going to group on the team column. And what we're going to do is find the sum of points. So this will create a table that gives us the total number of points by team all time. So let's hit OK and go ahead and let this run. And we can see our data is now each row has a unique country and then how many points that country has earned from Olympic medals. So we'll hit close and apply and go ahead and run that. All right. And then what we can do is we can go over to our model. Okay, so we can see medals by country is linked to athlete events. We don't necessarily need this linkage, but we'll keep it. The linkage we really care about is this linkage. So we want to link country population to medals by country. And what I did was drag country name over to the team field to indicate that we should create a relationship there. So let's click on this relationship and see what happened. So we are linking country name to team. And we can see it's a one-to-one relationship. So each row in country population is only linked to a single row in medals by country. And they're linked to where the country name matches the team name. So let's hit OK. All right. And what we can do now is go back to our medals by country file, and we can pull in the population. So we can hit is new column, and we can write a DAX expression to pull in the column from country population. So what we're going to say is we're going to say related country population population. So this pulls the population over from the country population because of that relation we just created, that one-to-one relation. So basically what this is saying is it's saying, okay, the value in this row for team is Chad. Let's go to the country population table. Let's find Chad there. And then it takes the population and pulls it over to the medals by country table. And what we'll do is we'll name this column population. Okay, so we now, what we did was write a DAX expression to pull the population over from the related table. We can now create another new column, and what this column will be called is medal ratio. So what we can do is divide population by points. So this will normalize how many Olympic medals a country has earned by the population of that country. So in some cases, points is 0, so the medal ratio will be infinite. And in some cases, we don't have the population of the country. What we can do is sort this descending, actually ascending, because infinity is always going to be number 1 here. All right, and then we can see the ratio for different countries. Now, this is a little bit messy. Not all countries have been able to be matched with the population, so it's a little bit messy data, but I wanted to show you how those joins and pulling values of columns over worked. All right, and then the final thing we'll do before we jump off here is we will make some rolling averages. So to do that, we're gonna go back to our data. We are going to go to athlete events, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So basically what we wanna do is for each country, we wanna find how the medal count grew over time. So maybe a country earned 4 medals in the first Olympics, 10 in the second, 3 in the third, but we wanna see that cumulative count. So to create that, we have to go back to our Power Query Editor. And what we have to do is go back and create a new table. What we'll call this NOC grouped. We will group by the NOC field. And what we'll do is we will find 2 different aggregates. So we're going to aggregate the number of medals. So that's the sum of medals. And then we'll find the number of points. So that's going to be the sum of total points. And we're going to group by NOC. We're also going to group by year. So what this will do is each row will be a given country in a given year, and it'll tell us how many medals and points they got in that specific year. I'll actually rename this to make it a little clearer. Medals by country and year. All right, so let's close and apply. Now what we can do, once we've done that, is we can create a DAX expression to find a rolling average. So this is going to be a complicated one, but I'll click new column and I'll explain what this function is going to be doing. So let's find rolling total. So rolling total is going to be our column name. And what we're going to do is call the calculate function, which evaluates an expression modified by filters. So what we're going to calculate is the sum of medals by country and year, points. So we're going to calculate the rolling sum, and we are going to add a filter. So our filter is going to be on medals by country and year, and we're going to have 2 filters here. What we're going to say is we want cases where year is less than or equal to earliest year. So earliest here is basically the current row. So it's saying find all of the rows that have year less than the current year. So that's the first kind of and. And then the second part of our and will be NOC equals earliest NOC. Okay, you might be wondering what this is doing. And I will explain it in just a second. Let me just make sure I get all of my parentheses closed properly. Okay, what is this doing? So this is finding the sum of the points in a subset of our data. And that subset is specified here. It's basically saying each row, look at each row, and then find all of the other rows which match the same NOC but have a lower year. So let's actually make this, let's only select a single NOC. I'll select USA just to make it easier. And then let's sort by year. Okay, so what this function does is in the first year, it's basically saying, okay, there's no rows lower than this. So we're gonna just take the total number of points from this row. The second time around, it says, okay, there's one row before this and also this row. So it's adding 139 and 49 to get 188. The next row, it's adding this row and all previous rows, and so on and so on. And you can see how the rolling total is increasing. The rolling total is split up by NOC. So it's basically looking at only the rows for USA and adding up all of the years that come before the current year. So we have a rolling total. And we can make a cool graph with that. So I will call this medal ratio. All right, and then I will call this one, what should we call this one? Rolling counts. So let's make a line chart here. And then what we can do is pull in some values from our medals by country. So on the axis, we'll have year. Our values will be the rolling total. and our legend will be the NOC. So for several different countries, this shows you how their metal counts are increasing. What we can go ahead and do is do a little bit of filtering here to only show certain NOCs. Now let's do basic filtering. So let's say we want to select only a few countries here. We could do that with this filter. Say we want to select Afghanistan, want to select Argentina, and Egypt. So this just shows you how the metal counts for different countries have grown over time. We can do a different type of filtering as well. Yeah, we can do top N filtering here. So we can look for only the top 10 countries that have the greatest metal count. And we'll sort it by rolling total. So we'll find the 10 countries that have the highest metal count over time. So there you have it. This chart shows the top 10 countries that have earned the most medals and how that count changed over time. Okay, we did a lot in this Power BI tutorial. We started by loading the data in and doing some exploratory analysis. We also loaded in a secondary data file and created a relationship so we could pull in these table names. Then we made a map that showed how many points each country had earned from medals all time. Then we created this map, which was a visualization and animation, which showed you how medal counts changed over time. Then we joined some data together to find the ratios of number of medals earned. And then finally, we found the rolling counts and showed how the number of medals per country changed over time. And along the way, we used the Power Query editor, so this panel up here. We used the report section. We used the data section and wrote some DAX expressions. And we used our model section to model our data and understand and create different relationships. So if you want to continue analyzing this data, there is a lot you can do. We didn't really touch any of these demographic columns. So you could look at how height and weight have changed over time. You could look at differences and similarities by gender. You could look at different events and see which countries tend to win given events. You could also do a lot more with these medals. You could look at which athletes have been the most successful and have earned the most medals, which athletes have competed in the most Olympics. You could look at which cities have hosted the most Olympics. There's a lot you can do here. So I hope you continue analyzing this data, and I hope this tutorial was useful. Thanks a lot.